There's a lot going on in the world these days, which often enough means that there's a lot going on in the world of inclusive marketing. And sometimes certain topics really just require a conversation, an opportunity to work through thoughts, feelings, and ideas on the journey to forming opinions. So that's what we're going to do on today's episode. I sat down with a few folks from my inclusive marketing crew, some voices you've heard before on this show and one new one that you'll get introduced to. So after this short break, you'll hear the latest Inclusive Marketers React show, where me and my colleagues do a deep dive to discuss important topics bubbling up in the world of inclusive marketing. Hello. Did you know that most businesses only use 20% of their data? That's like reading a book with most of the pages torn out, or paying for a coffee that's just 1/5 full. Point is, you miss a lot unless you use HubSpot. Their customer platform gives you access to the data you need to grow your business. The insights trapped in emails, call logs, and transcripts, all that unstructured data that makes all the difference. Because when you know more, you grow more. And when you get a full cup of coffee, you can do more too. But I digress. Visit HubSpot.com today. Hello to my inclusive marketing crew for another edition of Inclusive Marketers React. All right, before we get into this, because we've got a lot of important things to cover today, I want to just bring everybody up to speed on who we have here today. So, of course, I'm Sonia Thompson, host of Inclusion Inclusive marketing strategist and consultant. Let's go around the room and do quick introductions. All right, Edwige, you go first.
Hi, I'm Edwige Wijnands. I work at an agency where I am focusing on research as well as questions of inclusive marketing.
Sweet. Matthew.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew, pronouns he, him. I'm the co-founder of And Humanity, an inclusive marketing communications agency. Our headquarters operates on the stolen and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Sonia and Miriam for a while and meeting Edwige for the first time.
For sure. And also, Matthew has been a guest on the Inclusion of Marketing podcast 2 times before. This is his 3rd time, your 3-peat. I will link all those episodes in the show notes. And then Miriam, who is also today makes a 3-peater. You've been on the show twice before. We'll link those as well, but turning it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Miriam Shahab, she, her pronouns. I'm an inclusive marketing strategist and founder of Chatterbox Consulting for brands who can't keep quiet. I've got over 16 years of experience working in integrated marketing communications as a digital strategist and brand storyteller. And my sweet spot really is talking about corporate, consumer marketing, and social impact. I know we're going to get into that today. On a personal note, I'm based in Austin, Texas, and mom to an almost 3-year-old.
Sweet, sweet, sweet. Okay. We've got a variety of topics today. We're going to link articles to all the topics that we cover, so you've got some more background in the show notes for you as well. But we're going to get started with a topic that might be heavy on your mind because it seems to be in the news for a long time, and just the news cycle for it continues to extend because it seems like every week there's a new company that seems to be rolling back their thoughts on or their approach to diversity or inclusive marketing. So Matthew, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of bring us up to speed on what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what the count is at now. We've got Molson, Ford, John Deere, Harley Davidson, Lowe's. Am I forgetting any?
It's a good list.
I know I probably am. Tractor Supply. Yeah, so plenty of brands that are now kind of rolling back on their DEI efforts. Kind of was a big worry back in 2020 post George Floyd's murder that these brands would kind of treat this as a trend. And unfortunately, that's sort of happening. And I know I've heard some excuses that the economy is bad and maybe that's to do with it. But I'm under the impression that, these brands will regret it. But I'd love to hear from y'all. Like, are any of these brands surprising for any of you?
I was really surprised by Lowe's. I think one, because I've been a fan of Lowe's for a long time. I've been a consumer for Lowe's for a long time. For a long time, Lowe's was my home improvement store of choice. That was like the one that kind of felt my personality. Lowe's also has a Black CEO, and we know within Fortune 500 companies, we don't see too many Black CEOs. Unfortunately, they're very underrepresented. So of the brands that came forth and said they were rolling things back, that one kind of was like, like I didn't like it, right? And so, not to say that I like it for any of the brands, but it just felt like, why are they doing this? And then I guess the thought then went to, well, I don't like how Lowe's is approaching this, but hey, Home Depot is down the street, and Home Depot has the same things from my perspective. And Home Depot was just voted earlier this year as like the most inclusive brand by consumers. So whereas Lowe's, it feels like they are backing off of some of their internal diversity initiatives, and I think it's specifically to the LGBTQ plus community, the Home Depot seems to be leaning heavily into it. And so whenever we think about like, this is a tale of two brands in this particular category, it just feels like the Home Depot continues to lean into things that are important for me from a value standpoint as a consumer. And I have a feeling that for consumers who care about this type of thing and for their values, if they have a choice between one brand that seems to be leaning in and another brand that seems to be pulling back, they're going to, the ones that are pulling back are going to start to see drops in sales as a result. Just because I feel like Lowe's was great, but now, all right, we'll put you in the back burner.
Absolutely. They're going to vote with their wallet. What about one of you, Edwige, Miriam?
I wasn't very surprised because these brands strike me as a little bit more conservative than others. So it felt, they felt more vulnerable to me in terms of, how strong their values are for diversity and inclusion. But I was sad. I was sad for two reasons. Number one, for their customers. John Deere, for example, started a great program to protect Black farmers, to help them keep the properties within their families. I don't know if that program has been curtailed or not. It was still on their website a few days ago. But, what are their customers going to think? How are they going to react? And then I'm sad also for the brands because long term, we know that where the population trends are going, right? We know there is no growth among the white population in the United States. That's what the latest census showed. So where are they going to go? How are they going to grow? I don't know. And it's very difficult to recover from something like this as a brand. Like, which way are you? And win trust of people that are your customers, win that trust back. That's going to be a challenge. So that's my response.
Yeah, such a great point about the population and having nowhere to go. And it kind of showcases a lot of, unfortunately, short-term thinking from these brands, like very reactive thinking. I frequently, and I'm sure y'all frequently, need to argue not just the moral imperative, but the business case for this work. And this is a perfect example. Diversity is increasing for every underrepresented community. And with that increase, you would think that brands would try to prioritize these underrepresented communities. But yeah, it's been really, really disappointing, the short-sightedness with a lot of these brands. One thing I always try to tell myself that it's maybe not a bad thing because it sort of weeds out the performative brands, the ones that probably would have been doing performative work in the first place. So maybe this is just an easier way for us to discern. Mm-hmm. And like Sonia said, we can, vote with our wallets much more clearly now.
For sure.
Miriam, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to just agree with you, Edwige, because John Deere was the one I was really surprised by, because I have looked into the case study of the work that they have done for Black farmers. And they created a beautiful documentary last year. Like, it was just less than 12 months ago with Al Roker's entertainment arm. So I'm confused and curious as to, they put a lot of money into that. They got a lot of accolade and they've actually made impact. It wasn't just, we're going to do a Black history post on social media and showcase Black farmers. They actually are investing money into these Black farmers. And for them to now be in the headlines rolling back their DEI efforts, I wonder how much of it is a show to appease those who are asking them to take it down, but they're still doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it's just a reframe, a PR spin in a kind of a funny way to still do the work, but also appease those who are saying DEI is too woke, or, there is the conservative backlash in the individuals who've asked these organizations to take steps in different directions. It gets back to, as marketers, we always say, listen to your customers. And so some of these orgs that you just mentioned, or these brands, Matthew, they are, quote unquote, listening to some customers or some customers' threats. And I just wonder how involved are the full organization's teams and thinking about employee and how this affects employee retention. Sure, customers, of course, stakeholders, from a financial perspective and all that too. So the positive in me hopes that some of them are going to keep doing the work, but not label it as such.
Yeah. And I think the turning point for all this was, back, I don't even remember, it was the 2022, 2023, the whole Bud Light, Dylan Mulvaney incident. That was kind of the turning point. There was such, you can say, momentum at that time. And Bud Light partnering with Dylan Mulvaney. And I think the backlash that came from that was obviously, you could say surprising or not surprising, but what was so disappointing from that backlash was Bud Light backpedaling. And that's what kind of, I would say, caused this momentum shift, because it gave these far-right extremists, right-wing extremists, a feeling of like they were empowered. They felt like, whoa, we can make a major brand backpedal. So a lot of these, with these big brands, I don't know if y'all have read about it, but they were coordinated attacks towards these brands from far-right extremists, because they knew that they had the power. If Target, Bud Light, and during that period did not backpedal, I would think we'd have a very different trajectory. But that was a very, very unfortunate circumstance, and they utilized the CMO at the time as a scapegoat, which was, it was horrible. And it kind of, again, showed a brand that was just doing things performatively and didn't really have the cultural competence or the knowledge to actually uphold and stand by their decision and stand by their values, or their supposed values.
Yeah,
I completely agree with you. And I feel that in a way, we don't know why their sales went down so far. Is it because of the initial criticism, or is it because ultimately they lost a whole lot of customers because they backed down? Which of the two? And the result is that the sales were drastically down, and that really is what caused the issue and the concern. But we still don't know why the sales went down so far, because the reaction from the brand backing, initially sales started going down immediately with the criticism of Dylan Mulvaney, but then sales continued to go down even more drastically for a long period of time. And some of that is the effect of the two, right? Of the two things.
Yeah.
We don't know which caused the most damage. Unfortunately, we're dealing with this issue, and it has impacted, as you said very well, Matthew. That's what really is causing all this backlash at the moment and rolling back of DEI.
Yeah. One other thought, and I think the two issues that we saw with Target and Bud Light last year were very specific to marketing. But it feels like a lot of the attacks that we've seen this year with the companies rolling back policies have been more so internal corporate DE&I policies, in terms of like, we're not going to be supporting or participating in these particular surveys, and we're not going to be like attending specific events. But they seem very much focused on the LGBTQ plus community, but they're kind of extending more broadly. And I think that whereas, Edwige, you were pointing out, this started with reactions to marketing things, the continuation goes with like internal company policy. And I just want to make sure that marketers know that you have to think from a consumer standpoint. They're not separating the two. Oh, this is marketing, this is company. Like, they just see it as like Bud Light, Target, forward, right? Like they're just looking at it overall, like, what are they doing? And as you were saying, Miriam, before, like so many of these companies and these brands have been doing good in the communities that they've been supporting. Ford has been one that has been investing in underrepresented and marginalized communities for decades, right? Like they have been in the inclusive marketing game for a long time. And so it kind of feels like with these new changes, are they undoing everything that they've done? And you know what I mean? Like it just feels like somebody said before, very short-sighted. So we'll see how this goes. But like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think to comment first, Edwige, you were mentioning like what maybe caused the drop in sales and everything with the Bud Light controversy. And I like to utilize the example of Lego at the time. I don't remember the specific coordinated attack, but it was something around the LGBTQ plus community and something Lego was doing. And Lego just said, well, too bad, we're still supporting this community. And there was no news about it. Because it was not newsworthy,
Right.
because nothing really happened. And from then, if you've seen now, Lego has continuously invested in underrepresented communities and
That's
continue
awesome.
to succeed, grow. Sonia, you've sent me a bunch of stuff from Lego, or I've seen it on your Instagram or something like that. But yeah, maybe you didn't directly send me. You probably just saw it on your Instagram. But point is that, yeah, I think that it was because of that backpedaling that caused that controversy, and underrepresented communities, specifically trans community. I know if they had been supporting Bud Light, they definitely didn't after that.
Yeah.
In terms of it, so it was a lose-lose decision. Again,
Yes.
very short-sighted. And
Yes.
I want to make one more comment around. I think Sonia, you were talking about. It seems like a lot against the LGBTQ 2S plus community or the 2S LGBTQ plus community, and I think a lot of it has to do with we have to realize that, and we have to afford diversity within diversity. And the 2S LGBTQIA plus community has a lot of infighting as well, and a lot of disagreements around the, you can say the trans community specifically is the one that is the most targeted and harmed, even internally within the community. So with that, it's almost like this idea of palatable inclusion. What is okay for the dominant culture to accept, which is, what a middle-aged white male gay person, right?
Right.
Versus trans person. Like there's certain levels that they're quote
Yeah.
unquote willing to accept, and something like people with disabilities is much more widely accepted. And this is unfortunate because it shouldn't be that way. But I think that's where brands are having trouble, and why they're having trouble with the 2S LGBTQI plus community. But yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to get in on, though, you've said it twice, Matthew, is the coordinated attacks piece, and how I think brands of all sizes, no matter if they've been a legacy inclusive marketer like Ford, or if you might be new to the game, getting prepared on that crisis preparedness, including a cultural competency lens to it, is what I think all marketers need to be doing right now. There's just proof. Like every example you just gave, especially from this summer, for any brands that are somewhat committed or actually committed, getting prepared now for what to do in reaction to whether it's a coordinated attack or a small group of complaints that are very influential, and preparing all teams from legal to communication to marketing to HR and everyone now is what a good brand should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And I would even say, okay, so you want to be prepared, but you have to, as a brand, know why you're getting into it, right? So you need to stand strong on your values, include your leadership in these conversations. Just know why you're going in that direction. And if you do, then I think you'll be much more equipped in a case of a crisis.
Yeah. All right. We could stay on this topic for a long time because there's so much more to say. And there's already been lots of really insightful things. I've got this one part stuck in my head, palatable inclusion. And I think that's an uncomfortable reality that a lot of marketers and business leaders are going to have to deal with. So thank you for kind of framing it that way, Matthew. All right. Okay, I've got another podcast recommendation for you. It's Augmenters, hosted by Julie Meyer and Jimmy Edgerton, and it's brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. So on this show, Julie and Jimmy dive into mentoring and explore ways to augment and refresh the mentoring environment. They're using 8 core principles that weave relevant spirit guides and diverse guests, and Julie and Jimmy use a lot of humor and practical tips to help mentors and mentees get further, faster together. There's so many great episodes to tune into for this show, but one that you might find especially interesting is their latest episode, number 120, Mentoring Across Gender, Men as Allies and Mentors. Listen to Augmenters wherever you get your podcasts. Let's go to the next topic, which I think, Edwige, I want you to go ahead and introduce the one because I've got lots of opinions on this one. So go ahead and tell us what you brought for us to discuss today.
Okay. So this one topic is not newsworthy in the sense that it's big news. It's not newsworthy in the sense that it's new news, but it's newsworthy in the sense that it provides a good reminder about what we tend to forget. And when I say we, I'm not including inclusive marketers. I'm just talking we marketers. So the other day was earlier in the month. I was reading the New York Times in the morning and I came across this article and the title was, and I read, Harris's combative debate style will get its biggest test against Trump. And a few hours later, I go on LinkedIn and I see one of my contacts that had commented on or that had posted about this article, and there were already 70 comments. Now, wow. 70 comments is a lot, right? Early in the morning, like I would kill for 70 comments on LinkedIn. But anyway, the comments were actually from Black American professional women who were offended by the language, which, plays into the stereotype of the Black angry woman, which we know is very detrimental to the Black American professional women community. So I'm going to stop here. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to see if you had any thoughts, reactions, if you felt it wasn't all that shocking, or if it was, or any way you want to take this little fact. And we can start with Miriam.
I'm going to yield it to Sonia. I know she had a lot of thoughts. So get in here.
This one was just like, it's a big eye roll, right? Because I think that a lot of people, especially if you're not part of the Black community, you might look at this, as you mentioned, and say, it just kind of gloss over, like you don't necessarily see what is wrong with what they said, because they're really trying to get attention with a headline. But for Black women in particular, as you see with what was written in the comments, this is something that we hear all the time and we see play out in the media all the time about this whole stereotype of the angry Black woman and characteristics that we see a number of people have, but it only is kind of described as combative or angry or aggressive whenever it's associated with Black women, as opposed to assertive or they don't take any stuff, right? Like we're more positive traits that you might see for people who have a different identity. Same behavior, but it's just the way it's described is different for people with different identities. And so what I would recommend for marketers, and my point of view here, is that cultural intelligence is always required to know that this is something that Black women, unfortunately, has negatively impacted us for a very long, for decades, right? For a very long time. And whenever we're using these types of headlines, this type of language, this language is harmful because it perpetuates a narrative that is inaccurate and that negatively impacts people's careers, their livelihoods, all that other kind of stuff. And if you're not careful, even if you didn't intend it, even if you weren't unaware, unawareness does not diminish the harm that was caused. So we just always have to be mindful about their language that we're using and make sure that we are vigilant about ensuring that whenever we're trying to get attention, and I'm all for getting attention as a content creator, as a marketer, but that we're not doing it at the expense of other people. I think one of the comments somebody said, looks like somebody missed the cultural sensitivity training or an unconscious bias training at the New York Times whenever they were coming up with this, because there's a lot of bias that was incorporated in that headline and it wasn't cool.
Yeah. One of the comments also, and I didn't read all 70 of them, but I read a few. And one of them early on was about a woman who had canceled her subscription to the New York Times over this kind of language.
Yeah.
So from an inclusive marketer's perspective, this is really an issue. And not only we don't want to cause any harm, but we also don't want to alienate anyone and through our language. So, this is not new. This is not news, but yet it keeps on happening. So I thought it'd be interesting to get everyone's perspective.
Yeah. Matthew, I'm curious from your point of view. I'm sorry, because I wanted to hear, I want to hear what you have to say. And I'm also curious from your point of view as an inclusive marketer in Canada, because your demographics are different, right? And so, I want to hear all your thoughts.
Well, first of all, I've been following the election very closely because, first of all, we have team members all across North America and, clients all across North and beyond. But because this election, even though it's in the US, will have global impact, especially in Canada, I follow it really closely. So I have seen a lot of articles, not just that one, of this sort of language use, any way to even subtly tear down Harris. And I think that, and I've said this before, but I believe the most harmful language is usually subtle. It's usually subtle because if there's anything directly misogynistic or racist or whatever it may be, people call that out. And even conservatives are like, whoa, but it's this subtle language that slips through the cracks. And, like you said, Sonia, combative has a negative connotation. Why not use a different word like assertive or strong, etc.? And I think it was Edwidge or Sonia, one of you mentioned that, it's their job to get clicks, their job to create content that gets attention. I always say it's also responsibility. Anybody that works in the media sphere, that works in content, if you're reinforcing this work, then you're not doing your job, actually. It's your job to be counter-stereotypical. It's your job to not feed into these stereotypes because you have the power to influence. And because your content and even a simple headline has the power to influence, you're actually not doing your job when you use subtly harmful language. And I think this all goes back to cultural competency, cultural literacy. And again, I may be naive, but I don't think journalists and people that create content are doing this on purpose. It's their own unconscious bias. They're creating a headline, right? Mm-hmm. They're doing their job, quote unquote. But because they don't have their cultural competency training and because they haven't done the work, this gets out there and it reinforces to many audiences who also haven't done the work, right? So it's just this perpetual vicious cycle that when it all comes down to it, I wish in some sort of form of, whether it be university or even younger, like that there is this idea of cultural competency training and skill building, because I think that that's what's inherently missing for anyone who works in the media sphere. And they're the most, they influence the most people in their work. And everyone here has so much influence based on the content they create. So yeah, most harmful language is subtle and it happens all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah. Edwidge, do you have any other thoughts on that topic?
No, I think we talked about cultural intelligence, customer intimacy, because obviously there are customers that are, some of the New York Times customers are, I'm sure, professional Black women, and also processes, having the processes in place to review things. I know there are a number of processes within the New York Times to review the content. And those who review the content also need to have to be mindful of these kinds of stereotypes. So,
and if you don't mind, I have one more example that I just remembered about this, like headlines and how so many people read headlines without reading the article. That's kind of the joke about it. But like, take for example this headline, and I'll just read it, and you tell me. This is back in a couple of years ago. Bud Light parent says U.S. market share stabilizing after transgender promotion cost sales. Right? What does that tell you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't market to transgender people because it's going to cost you sales. Like that's yeah.
Yes, exactly. Transgender promotion cost sales.
Yeah.
Talk about lack of nuance, lack of work into the research of what actually happened. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like the power of words, right? I've been listening to this conversation, and at the end of the day, I'm a words girl, and it is about not just the word choice, but the order in which you put them. Matthew, I think your example is a perfect way to talk about that, because I think with processes, whether it's the New York Times or other content creators or brands, oftentimes there are, reviewers and editors and even, AI-based bias checkers. But I don't think I have seen a system that is enough to understand the full context of this headline with this subhead, or this sentence paired with this picture. What is the subtlety that is being conveyed or told to certain audiences as acceptable? And so to me, it's so rich that words matter.
Yeah, just to build on what you just said for context, remember that whole H&M controversy a couple of years ago where there was a little black boy with a t-shirt and it said coolest monkey in the crew or something like that?
Yeah.
That t-shirt by itself with the copy doesn't mean anything. Oh, coolest monkey in the crew. But the minute you put it on a little black boy, it means something completely different. So having that context, it's not just about the words, or it's not just about the like you have to understand the full context. And going back to what you mentioned, Advij, earlier, it's how can we bake into a process, one, cultural intelligence, but two, some sort of checks and balances so that these types of things don't get published, that they're caught in advance. So we've got some type of things that are available.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that this on this point of context. So I went back to the New York Times and looked for occurrence of the term combative debate style,
Right.
and they've been using it in other contexts, like in the context of J.D. Vance, for example, and others.
Yeah.
But the key is the context. Who are you talking about? Are there stereotypes about this community? And that really where you need to pay attention. It's not exclusively the words, it's the words in context.
Absolutely. Very cool. All right, Miriam, you're up. Do you have anything that you want us to react to?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so today I want us to talk about microfeminism. So follow me here. Definitely been a buzzword-ish of sorts this year. I'd say the past maybe 4 to 5 months. What are we at the end of September? Yeah, so really started to pick up in the spring on TikTok, like many things do. And so you might be asking what microfeminism is. The way that folks on TikTok today are talking about microfeminism is it's small, everyday acts of resistance that really focus on prioritizing women's voices and experiences over the idea of the larger feminist movement. It's really focused on personal and interpersonal context and those just everyday moments. It's intentionally not tackling systemic issues. So there's some interesting things that are happening here in good ways and some things that I think are lacking. And I would love to get your takes on this. So it's a lot of younger women, and most of the content has been created by white women, from what I can tell. That's where it really started. And this idea of microfeminism, just to give you some examples of what people are quoting, is saying things like, when anyone is talking about a person in a position of power, I'm going to assume it's a woman. So if my colleague is saying, I need to work on a memo for the CEO, my response would be, oh, who is she? And just using a she-focused pronoun, assuming that person in power is a woman. And another one I thought was really fun is taking it outside of the corporate workplace. A lot of them are corporate workplace-ish microfeminism, is when I hear someone talking about a particular sport, oftentimes we say women's basketball, women's soccer. So instead, when I'm talking about soccer or basketball that is men, choosing to say, oh, the men's soccer team is playing here, the men's basketball team, to kind of push it back at you. So it's a lot of it's getting ahead of microaggressions in a micro way, in a one-on-one way. It's, to me, an unstereotype, mindfully pushing back. But I'd love to hear what y'all think of this. Matthew, what do you think?
I'd like to yield and pass this off to as the one male identifying here. So, though I will have thoughts later.
I personally love it. I think it's amazing. And the examples that you just used, I think that when it comes time, like I personally feel that marketers have a responsibility to change narratives and to change the way in which we perceive and view the world. So what better way to do that, especially when they're harmful stereotypes and things like that? What better way to do that than to, so quote unquote, normalize things, normalize there being a woman CEO, normalize whenever we're talking about, did you see the game last night, that it was a women's sports game? And I think ways that really smart and forward-thinking brands can do this is by making this a part of their inclusive language guidelines. So instead of trying to be gender neutral, they can or might decide that they want to push things a little further and incorporate some forms of microfeminism, not to ruffle people's feathers, but really just to change the narrative and be pioneers there. And it kind of goes to, when it comes to representation, sometimes what we'll hear people saying is, oh man, brands are going too far. It's like they're over indexing on underrepresented groups, and that's not really reality. But it's kind of like a right sizing, like it's been so lopsided and underrepresented for such a large period of time. There isn't harm in sort of leaning heavy into one represented group or a variety of underrepresented groups, because one, not only it should help other people be empathetic if they've been part of a dominant group and haven't been used to it, if they feel uncomfortable with being excluded or not being centered, imagine what other people have been feeling like for all this time, right? But it's a way to sort of help usher people in and change their narrative in a way that is very cheeky. And I just kind of really like the idea of a brand doing that and leaning in and taking that stance that they are sort of really using their marketing, using their copy, using their language to do that in a subtle but very impactful way.
Yeah, I also love it. I think it's can be really funny. I love what Sonia said also about brands taking this on. I wish you said one thing, that it was mostly younger women. I wish everybody would take this on with humor, because it can be really funny, because it's a serious situation. And there are more women than men today, right? At least in the US. I don't know all the statistics around the world, but and we're still having areas where we're fighting, and we are not growing in the business world as much as men, and we're not making as much money, and so I think it's fabulous.
Yeah,
love it.
Yeah, and I think huge. Obviously, I'm a big believer in progress over perfection. I've said that a lot. Like Miriam, you said, it's usually younger white women. I think, again, diversity within diversity. This doesn't directly support trans and non-binary people, but progress over perfection. So I do love it. And you can already tell from the comments online, etc. Although there's a lot of support, you can see why microfeminism and these acts are needed, because even when I posted about this, I had someone comment my LinkedIn saying, quote unquote, like something like, these women sound difficult to work with or annoying. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. And anyways, won't get into that. But the point is that it is needed, because these are small acts of microfeminism that was showcased in this video, and it already triggered someone because they had to, for once, not be the center of attention, decenter themselves.
Yeah.
And it's funny how little it took. Sorry, Miriam, go ahead. You had
No,
something to
I
say.
was going to say you're right, because I think the small steps piece is what makes the involvement for any individual approachable and accessible, right? Sometimes the work of DEI, the work of cultural competency feels so huge. And maybe that's just me as
Yeah,
an inclusive marketer, as my responsibility, as you said. But I think even in the day-to-day workplaces too, it gives people a framework in which to take a first step. My challenge when I'm being really a little bit more critical of this kind of trend is what next? I like the sentiment, but I'm not optimistic about its impact. I think that people have been doing these things, great, probably for a longer time than this spring when the trend people started talking about it on social media. And it was funny because at the same time, just recently, the McKinsey Woman in the Workplace report came out. They've been doing it for a decade. So the 2024 report came out, and I was looking at the findings there. And it's sad, y'all. Like the woman in the US in a professional settings in 10 years, not much has changed. A lot of the markers that they've been tracking around workforce, different titles in terms of microaggressions experienced by women in the workplace are exactly nearly the same. And McKinsey has so much data. I would say it is a pretty credible report. And because they've been tracking it over the years, including some of these big milestone moments, especially in the US, over the past decade, I kind of looked at these two things at the same time. I'm glad. I think it's very fun content, very shareable, but then what? And so it's just like the follow through is really important to think about, whether it's for a brand or just even an individual.
Yeah, and I think, said this before, true inclusion doesn't happen unless people in power advocate for it as well. And in this situation, microfeminism, if you see all the examples, it's women or female identifying folks that are doing that work. I didn't see a lot of men showcasing their acts of microfeminism, but I think that's where the most power is, because that's, again, you're countering the stereotypes of day-to-day life. Like, for example, for myself and my wife, everybody assumes I do all the driving. I don't. I sit in the back of the dog. 90% of the time, my wife drives. As I got older, I just didn't like driving anymore. Everybody sends, not everybody, but a lot of people would send my wife the kids' birthday party invites and not myself. Little do they know, I handle the family calendar because I'm type A and I'm very neurotic and I need to organize everything, like all the daycare, school registration, class searching. Yeah. My wife is capable, but my neuroticism kind of takes over, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, this is your strength then." And like people assume that she may be the pushover parent, but I'm the pushover parent. I'm the one that doesn't know how to set boundaries, and with our daughter and everything like that. And my daughter knows for sure that I'm the weak one. Just the other day, I was like, "Oh yeah, you can eat this." It was like a snack or something. And she's like, "Did mom say so?" I was like, "I said so. It's okay. You can have it." So that's the thing. These are small things, but especially when it comes to like the kids' birthday party invites and talking to other dads, where you can change the conversation to, oh, we don't have to talk about sports and business all the time. We can talk about how difficult it was to, register for daycare, all the things that is assumed to be the mom's role a lot of the time. So I think that those small acts that happen from the male identifying dads, or sorry, not just dads, but men in general, that's where true inclusion happens, because we're the ones that have the privilege. We're the ones that, even especially in the workforce, that need to advocate for this work. So I think that that's maybe why things haven't changed, because microfeminism and the hashtag and how it started was, again, mostly viral because of women, right?
Love, love, love the example. I think things will change more when we start to see more brands getting in on the cause, because they can be very much cultural leaders, and brands can do a very job of making things seem like, oh yeah, like, that's what it is. So we've covered a lot today, and we didn't even cover everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule another session, because there's so many things for us to chat about. But Edwige, Matthew, Miriam, just want to thank you so much for your time, your points of views. I learned so much. Any parting words of wisdom for marketers and business leaders on what they should do as, like, they're seeing these headlines, they're seeing all these things happen? How should they take it, process it, and apply it to their businesses?
Keep going. Inclusive marketing is not going away because populations are changing, and this shall pass.
I'm going to say something similar. I don't know when this is going to publish, but stay the course. No matter what happens with the US election, inclusive marketing still matters. The work still matters. Stay committed.
I guess, similar to that, I would say, I think, Miriam, you might have mentioned that inclusive marketing can be such a giant topic and hard for people to kind of dive into because it's maybe overwhelming or intimidating. I would say that it doesn't have to be. For those listening to this is a good step. I would also suggest you follow these three folks on LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever y'all post as well, because that's how you build your cultural competency. You listen to folks with different lived experience than you do that work in this space. Follow DEI experts and practitioners who post a lot of content. I know that that's how I built my own and upskilled myself in terms of cultural competency and skill set. And it doesn't have to be an overnight thing. You just have to start. But yeah, maybe it doesn't have to be so intimidating.
Very cool. And one last thing I'll say is that real change happens when we have the courage to act in a manner in which we want the world to be and we want our situation to be, not sort of caving into what we think will happen to us if we stand up for what's right. So want to just encourage marketers to be brave, be courageous, and go for it. Thank you all. This has been a lot of fun. Looking forward to the next one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Loved it.
Oh my goodness. I hope you loved this discussion as much as I did. We covered a lot of ground and there was still so much more that we didn't get to talk about. By the way, if you have any questions or topics that you'd like me and or a group of us to react to and discuss, definitely send them my way. I think I might have said this before, but I'm going to drop links to all the topics that we discussed into the show notes so you can access them if you want to explore a little more. Also, I want to hear your point of view on the topics that we chatted about. So let's continue the conversation over on social and in the DMs if that's where you feel most comfortable. If you like this show, please do share it with a friend, colleague, and or your network. And if you're feeling extra kind, do leave a rating and review for it in your podcast player of choice. It really does go a long way towards helping more people discover the show, which I like to think means we're helping more people practice inclusive marketing well. Another quick question for you. Are you getting the Inclusion and Marketing newsletter? If not, really, what are you even doing? Each week, I send news, tips, insights, resources, and other goodies to help you attract a bigger, more diverse, and fiercely loyal customer base. Head over to inclusionandmarketing.com/newsletter to get signed up. I'll also drop a link to that in the show notes for you so you can access it easily. Until next time, remember, everyone deserves to have a place where they belong. Let's use our individual and collective power to ensure more people feel like they do. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you soon.